Okay, everybody, good morning. I appreciate Dr. Fontenot helping me with the presentation this morning. Um, Thank you, Sarah, for a great program today. And I see Michael and Keith are there. Hope everybody's doing good. And we're going to talk about azaleas this morning. And somebody was just posting on Facebook how wonderful the azalea blooms have been this month. And I wholeheartedly agree. Back in mid February with the cold weather, we certainly didn't realize how good the azalea blooms were going to be once we got to mid March and late March. But the cold weather did not do damage to the flower buds. And usually, when you have cold weather in February, it kind of holds back the plants, and then all your spring bloomers start blooming at about the same time in March, and you don't get the spread out bloom. So we're going to talk about azaleas very briefly this morning and talk about culture and a few varieties. But as all of you all know, azaleas are Louisiana's most planted ornamental plant. Most home landscapes have azaleas. The old southern indica varieties are the ones that are most common, and the encore azaleas, which most of you all know about. And don't forget about the deciduous native azalea species and varieties, and those are popular with home gardeners. But mostly we know about the evergreen varieties of azaleas. Azaleas have a long history in the southeastern United States. They were first introduced in 1848, and this was in Charleston, South Carolina, at what is now Magnolia Plantation. So they've been around the last 180 years or so. And probably there's 60 to 70 varieties of azaleas that are sold and grown in Louisiana that are reasonably available. And of course, I like golf. So when I think about azaleas, I think about Augusta National Golf Club in Augusta, Georgia, and we all associate azaleas blooming with dogwoods and spirea. And back in the olden days, everybody in their yard, they had an azalea plant, then a spirea plant, then an azalea plant, then a spirea plant. So this is actually what kind of landscape you can have when you mass plant azaleas, and they all come into bloom at the same time. Really a nice, gorgeous setting of azaleas there, kind of a mixed color pattern. And that's also a picture of the Augusta National Golf Club in Georgia. But underneath pine trees is ideal for azaleas. And this is actually at Norton Gallery in Shreveport. That's one of the main places to see gorgeous mass plantings of azaleas. Now, I'm very concerned about the azaleas there right now with the cold weather. There's a lot more plant damage in Shreveport, Monroe, and Ruston than there is in central Louisiana. So I'm not really sure how the azalea plantings took it at Shreveport at the Norton Art Gallery, but they have very nice gardens there. If any of you all are ever in Shreveport, that's mostly G.G. Gerbing and Formosa there in that planting at the Norton Art Gallery. Okay, so what do we need to know about azaleas to be successful? And this is a good review for all home gardeners. We need acid soil. We want to make a raised bed 6 to 8 inches above the native soil. That raised bed soil needs to be well drained. The more clay you have in your soil, the more problematic your azaleas are going to be. So we really don't like to have azaleas in clay soil. And if you do have bad soil, you need to make the raised bed even higher than if you had decently well-drained soil. Now, the azaleas, as far as sun, they like more sun than shade. Most people think azaleas like more shade than sun. Really 50-50, more sun, less shade, filter shade in the afternoon, underneath tall pine trees where you get some sunlight penetrating in, but a little bit more sun than shade on azaleas. If azaleas are growing in shade, they're going to be taller and leggier, and they're not going to have as many blooms in the springtime. We want to plant in the fall, winter, or spring. Early in the spring is certainly better than middle of the spring, late in the spring. Be careful when you plant azaleas and don't plant them too deep. Check the root system like Sarah was talking about earlier. If you have any matted and circling and girdling roots, kind of loosen up the outside of the root ball and get your roots kind of going out of that circular pattern. Uniformity in soil moisture. That's really hard for people to manage sometimes, but azaleas don't like to be wet and don't like to be dry. They don't like overhead irrigation. If you have a turf grass, a sprinkler head going over the top of your azaleas and your other shrubs and your landscape beds, that's not a good idea. They would rather have drip irrigation on them. So, and of course, summer and fall months are the times that you really got to watch the moisture on your azaleas. We're very dry in September, October, November. That's when azaleas are really setting and developing their buds for the next spring bloom. So make sure you have plenty of soil moisture there for your azaleas in the fall without overwatering them. And then you want to fertilize your azaleas in the spring after they bloom. Don't fertilize before they bloom. Wait till they finish blooming, and you'll get a better a response there. A lot of people put out Epsom salt and ironite on their azaleas, and that's okay, but have a reason to put it out. Know what your magnesium is in your soil. If your pH is too high, you may have iron deficiency. So you can put ironite out. That just camouflages the problem. It would be better to correct the soil pH than it would be to put out ironite. But ironite could be used as a temporary fix to get your interveinal chlorosis and your iron deficiency to disappear. Pine straw mulch is wonderful for azaleas. If you need to prune your azaleas, of course, we want a reason to prune, but it's best to prune them after they bloom in the springtime and before the end of June, early July, because if you prune after that, you're going to affect the flowering for the next year. And then you want to control your azalea lace bugs. I'll show you a picture of those. And then I think most of us know that we have varieties of azaleas that bloom in the spring, and then varieties of azaleas that bloom multiple times during the year. Robin Hill varieties like Conversation Piece on the top left there, and the Encore azaleas, that's Autumn Twist on the bottom left. Some of the Encore azaleas bloom as many as 32 weeks a year, so that's like 8 months of the year. It's incredible how much bloom you can get on the Encore azaleas. Here's your azalea and camellia fertilizer. Not a whole lot of nitrogen and some P and some K there. So all these ferti-lome products are very nice products to use for your landscape plant fertilization, and there's different products for different plant types. You could just use a ferti-lome or an Osmocote general purpose slow release fertilizer, and that would do just as good. Broadcast this uniformly in the bed. Don't just spot treat your plants with fertilizer. Try to fertilize uniformly over the whole landscape bed area. And then a lot of people do face a pH issue in their azaleas and landscape beds. We need to know what our pH is. It needs to be down there in the 5.5 range. 6.0, 6.5 is a little bit too high for azaleas. The roots aren't going to grow. The nutrients are not going to be taken up very well. 7.0, the plants are going to just sit there and they're not going to do anything. So you may need to put sulfur out to lower your pH. Very seldomly you have to use lime in your azalea planting. So I like to use the soil sulfur or the aluminum sulfate. Those are my two recommendations, but you need to know how much to put out per 100 square foot of bed area, and the only way you know that is to get a soil test result. So we don't want to be guessing on that. We want to be testing on that. The southern indica azaleas are the ones that are most common. George Tabor and G.G. Gerbing and Formosa, red Formosa. These are the ones that you see in St. Francisville that get 8, 10 feet tall, and they're in very prolific bloom right now. Sorry, that's a duplicate slide. Okay. Multi-seasonal blooming varieties, the Robin Hill varieties that I mentioned earlier. Watch It is a very nice pink. Conversation piece is the bicolor bloomer. It's the LSU Ag Center Louisiana super plant. And usually the Robin Hills bloom 3 months in the fall and 2 months in the spring. They're heavier bloomers in the fall than they are in the spring. So you're going to get 5 or 6 months out of bloom on the Robin Hills. And believe it or not, y'all, now there's 33 varieties of Encore azaleas on the market. The azalea that knows no season, the azalea that gives you more blooms more often. Mr. Buddy Lee in Independence, Louisiana, developed Encore azaleas, and they debuted in 1997 with 6 varieties, and now there's 33 varieties. And we keep telling Buddy that he needs to eventually come up with a new group. When we get to 40, we're going to say that's enough, and we got to start on something else. But all the Encore azaleas are very nice plants. They're going to get anywhere from 3 to 6 feet tall, depending on the variety that you plant. And based on the weekly plant counting of the flowers that I did when I worked at LSU, you get 21 to 33 weeks of bloom on Encore azalea. So, anywhere from 5 to 8 months. These are the 2 new Encore varieties for 2021. Autumn Majesty is a very nice semi-double purple. And of course, I like that one because it's the right LSU color. And then the Autumn Starburst, which is a bicolor with the coral pink and the white. There's an Autumn Sunburst already on the market, but this new one is Autumn Starburst, and everybody likes these bicolor azalea varieties. Both of these are in the 3.5 foot growth range. Very manageable as far as plant size, and these are just now starting to show up at the garden center. So you should be able to find a few of these this spring, or definitely some of these this coming fall. And the picture on the left is Autumn Starburst with a little bit of frost on it a month or so ago. And then that's Autumn Majesty on the right at a trade show or loaded up somewhere that I took a picture of. Okay, what about native azaleas? We have 2 main ones that are in Louisiana, the Rhododendron canescens, and these are called mountain azaleas, Piedmont azaleas. Honeysuckle azaleas is what most people know them as, and these are your deciduous shrubs. They actually are found native on like moist creek banks, swampy areas, which kind of doesn't fit the azalea profile, but those soils there are sandy and they're very well drained, and that's what these plants like. And they like a high afternoon shade in the afternoon, well-drained soil, and you got to hold back on the fertilizer on these. You don't want to fertilize your native azaleas very much. So these are some pictures of Rhododendron canescens at the LSU Ag Center in Hammond the end of last week. And then the other native azalea that you see around is the Rhododendron austrinum, which is the yellow one, and it's native more a little bit to the east of us, and these are sold at garden centers in Louisiana. We have both of these native azaleas at Clegg's Nursery right now. Okay, I've got to speed up, but this is what some of the azaleas look like in the winter time, where you're losing foliage and new foliage is coming on. These azaleas are being pruned too much. You've got some dieback in the canopy. The plants are probably not being fertilized, so you've got to take proper care of your azaleas. We're going to see bark split on azaleas this year with the cold weather, and this is not going to show up till we get into later in April and May, and then you'll see a brown stem in your plant canopy. Go back, look and see this bark split, and you'll cut this limb out at the point of origin and try to get all this dead wood out of your plant canopy. And then the main insect plague of azaleas is the lace bugs. and you're going to start seeing this in April and May, but the populations are out there right now. Very easy to see these insects, but you want to control these with acephate, horticultural oil, etc. before they get started. So right now is the time to monitor for your azalea lacebug damage before the damage gets like this. And then that's lichens on the left. 1,800 questions a day on Facebook about lichens. Lichens are an indicator of plant stress. So your plants need to be fertilized. They're not growing well. The bark's not expanding. They're in too much shade. There's no air circulation. There's not enough sunlight. So that's an indication of when lichens are going to be on your plants. And then there's an azalea there on the right. That's one of the encores. And you can see those shoots, those stems that kind of bypass the rest of the plant. I call those bypass shoots. Some folks call them water sprouts, but I like to prune those off during the growing season. Find that really tall limb that kind of goes past the rest of your plant canopy, follow it back into the center of the plant, and cut it off at a point of origin. Try to do more thinning on your plants instead of doing topping on your plants. So there's two male spokesmodels. That's Buddy Lee, and that's myself, and we're at his nursery in Loranger, Louisiana. That was last summer, and that's Autumn Starburst and Autumn Majesty at my feet there. There is an Azalea Society of America. We have a Louisiana chapter, and we're an active group, and I'm the president because I keep missing the meetings and they keep reelecting me. But we will be having a national azalea meeting in Lafayette next March, the 10th through the 12th. So we want to invite everybody to come to our national azalea convention and look forward to participating in that. So hopefully y'all got a few points and tips there on azaleas and growing azaleas and a few varieties. If anybody has any questions or comments, most of y'all know how to track me down. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody in the Central region today at the Spring Gardening Seminar. So thank you, Sarah, and I hope that gave y'all some good information that will benefit you.